All right. Hello. Good day, everyone. I'm here with Cassa Grant, and we're going to be talking about her chapter in Activate Your Life a little bit, get to know Cassa. We did a whole slew of these interviews yesterday. I think 18 of the 23 authors, something like that. Glenn was a powerhouse, and then I think I did 8 or 9 in the afternoon. Really cool to see everybody showing up and telling their story. So actually, you were on for a few minutes, and you were telling us about your adventure bus driving days, and I actually wanted to share something with you. This book reversed
Huh?
by Paulo Coelho.
Yeah.
This is a part of his life, and he hopped on one of these adventure buses and rode from Amsterdam to Kathmandu on this adventure
Whoa.
bus in the
Wow.
70s.
That's awesome.
And as you were telling that story yesterday, I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds real similar, uh, and super epic. So I can
That's amazing.
appreciate. Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm curious to see what happens in post-COVID times, but communal travel is amazing. It can be really, really, well, first of all, it's more sustainable in terms of just the amount of fuel and what have you you're going through. But it's a really fun way to meet people that, you know, stick with you for life. I've had passengers get married off of trips. I mean, not right off of trips, but we actually did have a wedding on the bus one time, at the drive-through wedding, chapel in Vegas, the only one that will fit big rigs.
Whoa.
Yeah, so, I've definitely and, like, especially my co-drivers are people that I consider, like, brothers and sisters, basically, so, you just connect with people in this when you're in this kind of environment that's very unfamiliar, but you're all doing it together, and it really builds that, camaraderie, so and I think I mentioned, when I first rode the Green Tortoise is the name of the company. When I first rode it, it was going down to Baja, and I met all these people who were doing the things that I wanted to do, but I hadn't really brought that type of person into my world yet, so it was a really great way for me to, really see
Hmm.
that goal in action in a way that was like, "You know what? Here's what you do. Just do it like that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like, this was 2004, so, I mean, the internet was around, but it wasn't like you could just literally I mean, you could Google it. Maybe it just wasn't that savvy. But it was great to be exposed to people who are actually really doing those things.
Yeah, this is a perfect transition to your exercise because
Mm,
you're talking about archetypes and using them as a guide for a way of being. And it seems like here on the Green Tortoise, you encountered some archetype of a person
absolutely.
that you were looking for. Um,
Yep.
so I don't know, however you want to use that to segue into talking about your work.
Yeah, the
This
Explorer
is
was certainly an
appropriate.
archetype that I encountered on that trip on those trips quite a lot. The Explorer, the Rebel, probably a little bit of the hero, maybe a little bit of the leader, the ruler kind of archetype, basically. But yeah, so that that exercise, like I said, Todd Herman's book is amazing. It's called The Alter Ego Effect, and he has a very
Mm.
comprehensive system for um, building this entire ecosystem of archetypal, self-help type of plan, basically. Whereas mine is a little simpler because it's just something that I want to use to help you really tap right into that feeling throughout our coaching journey. So I actually use that once they name that archetype. I usually use that throughout whatever coaching engagement we have so that we can kind of go, well, what would so and so do? What would, mine's kick ass Cass, what would she do in that situation? So, um, it helps us, I mean, by speaking that unconscious language, when I say the explorer, you immediately have people that pop into your mind. You understand what that means immediately. You don't need a bunch of other explanations. You can actually feel what it means. And that's what I love about that so much because it's not just be this or do that. It gives you a concrete example that's very visceral that you can literally like feel yourself into really quickly.
Yeah, and I'm wondering how you got started. Did you develop those archetypes for yourself before Todd Herman's book was ever around?
Well, no, well, so yeah, I did start doing this before I read that book. So I was in branding for a long time. So I was a copywriter and and I still do brand consulting, but one of the tools that you use in branding, if you're into it, especially for storytelling. So storytelling has always been my main focus with copywriting in general. And it definitely ties over into coaching because whatever stories we tell ourselves are the stories that we live, basically. So it's kind of understanding stories really well helps me coach people. But the the genesis of that was when I was in branding, using brand archetypes is a really great way to edit how you show up as a brand. It could be a personal brand, it can be a company, etc. So um,
Hmm.
a lot of coaches have a magician archetype because this whole idea of transformation, right? We help you turn from one thing into another thing. But you'll see explorer, rebel, that kind of thing. That different coaches will have to appeal to different people. And so people don't know that that's what you're doing. They don't like, she seems very rebellious. I like her. But you tap into that collective unconsciousness and they go, there's just something about that person I like. And it's because you've used that archetype well to communicate in a subconscious way. So, I mean, it sounds a little bit creepy, but the way that you use it, especially in branding, is if you're writing a post, if you're creating any kind of content, if you have your archetype, I would say one and usually like a subset. If you have your archetype really clearly in mind, and you say, okay, if you're doing like a prestigious archetype, like they call it the ruler, or it can be called a couple of different things, but basically it's like the ruler, the emperor, that kind of thing. If you are writing a post that's super off the wall and wackadoodle, like, is that really going to be something that the emperor will be doing? And so you can use that to ask yourself those questions so that you can edit and go, I need to tweak this so that it's more in line with what a ruler would do. So yeah, I've been using that in branding for a long time.
Hmm.
And then the idea of naming it came because I was just like, I need to be able to pull back to this very regularly in coaching sessions. And so whenever you name something, it becomes a real thing, you know? Um, and that's when I started asking them to name it because that really helped me pull them back to that high, basically the best version of themselves.
Yeah, well, this is fascinating. So I can see how, okay, you write a post as the emperor, it's going to come off in a certain way.
Mhm.
Now, if people name an archetype and then they're doing a Facebook Live, like, or an interview or something like that, would you have them show up as a particular archetype
Mm. If that's appropriate.
for that type of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. If that's appropriate for them, and if it's somebody, I mean, and that's part of what the exercise is too, because yeah, that's something where the alter ego effect takes it much further than this. Like this is where Beyonce shows up as Sasha Fierce. Like when she goes on stage, she becomes Sasha Fierce. She's not Beyonce Knowles anymore. And so if that's something that's appropriate for you, you can absolutely do that. If it feels like that gives you power, the whole
Hmm.
point of it is to give you that power, not to make you feel cheesy and I will say, like, you have to get over yourself to be able to do this because it feels ridiculous at first. You're just like, what am I doing? I'm pretending to be a superhero, right? But it's not even just pretending, it's embodying. And so when you just shift into that way of thinking, you become that. Um, and it can be really, really helpful, especially in like what you're talking about. If it's podcasts, if you feel really uncertain, um, speaking in public or doing these kinds of things, like some way that Todd Herman talks about using tokens or totems, I mean, and other trigger points that you can use to tap into that person. I mean, again, his is way more intense and more in depth about how to use these in many different ways. But um, the first part is even just thinking about, well, who could I be? Because you can have several different ones too, like not to go to schizophrenic or something, but like you can have, an archetype that you use for when you're on stage. You can have an archetype that you use for when you're writing. You can have an archetype that you use just when you need to give yourself a boost, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't know about the Sasha Fierce thing. That's an amazing name.
Mm,
And I'm thinking about, like, a friend of mine who's gets a lot of business because of her social media posts, and a lot of times she's showing up as the rebel,
mhm,
but sometimes she's showing up as, like, the tough love,
mhm.
sort of authority, and then also she's showing up as the, like, um feminine, like, I see you and I'll support you in this sort of, like, feminine togetherness.
Yep.
And so they all sort of work together, but they're all quite different.
Mhm,
uh, places where she's coming from to write those posts.
mhm.
And I had never thought about it before, but now that you're saying it, I'm like, okay, wow, I can see these different modes of writing posts
She's
or
really
marketing.
doing a good job if you can list them off like that, and that's what you want. I would say no more than 3 for each person for that type of marketing. Um, but yeah, she's clearly doing a good job if you can go, she does this, this, this. Yeah.
Okay, so how often are the people that you work with, like what are you creating identities for mostly?
So a lot of my clients, I call them offbeat leaders, and they can be, it's basically someone who finds themselves in a leadership role. That could be through entrepreneurship, it could be through being the best doer who got promoted, and maybe you saw that as a step up, right? But you start to feel like, okay, I don't have an MBA, I don't have any leadership training, or maybe a little bit of leadership training, or experience is also good, clearly. But there's a little bit of imposter syndrome because they don't feel like they didn't start at 18 and go, I'm going to be a leader. It kind of came in this kind of organic way. And so a lot of people will feel this sense of, uh, am I legit? Like, am I somebody who should be doing this or could be doing this, right? So um, those so some of the people, if it's corporate, it's generally people that, like, one of the things that they want is confidence and productivity, right? So generally their archetype, their super you that they use will be around that, something like confident so and so, or going for it so and so. With entrepreneurs, it can be more around just showing up as that version of yourself. Like, I have Sparkly Joe in my as my case study, of that bright shining person that is there, but sometimes you're kind of like, oh, I'll just do it this way and whatever. But if you show up as the way that you want to intend to show up, committing to that way, that can be more like a kind of a bright shining archetype, I guess, would be those two. I would say those are the two main categories that most people have,
Mm.
um, that I work with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I was interviewing Jimmy yesterday, Dr. McDowell, and he was talking about his wrestling
He's
career
awesome.
trajectory.
His his stuff, and I
He
was
is awesome.
like, yeah.
And he was telling me that the veteran wrestlers will give you an identity when you
Ah,
start,
yes.
and you
Cool.
and you sort of try it on, and they're
Mhm.
like, actually try this other identity." And
Nice.
it sounded like there was a few variations of
Mhm.
his identity, and he became the golden boy, and now he, like, walks into the
Love
wrestling arena with, golden outfit on, and uh, he has to embody the golden boy, and here you're talking about, the shiny
it.
person.
That's a great, yeah, that's a great parallel. You're right, because I mean, and you look at lucha libre, and in any professional wrestling in the U.S., it's the exact same thing, right? You always have the heels, you always have the heroes, and how they play out in millions of different ways in our lives, and how we see things. But the more we can pull ourselves back from it and see, like, okay, this is an archetypal situation, rather than I'm in it and I feel trapped and I feel attacked or whatever, the better we can do, right? And yeah, I'm sure when he walks on as golden boy, it's still him. It's just a facet of him, and he can embody that. I mean, part of it is the costume, all of those things that helps you embody those types of things as well. I mean, I think I used to have, well, and I think that's part of where this offbeat leader idea came up for me, was I had this idea of, like, if you were a business woman, you had to wear, I had this idea of, like, I called her Patty's shoulder pads. It was like this 80s business lady who was, like, real down to business. It was basically based off of Amy Schumer's 80s ladies thing. But it's just kind of like, I guess I had this feeling of, like, I was not businessy enough. Like, I didn't want to straighten my hair or, wear suits. I don't know why you'd wear suits working from home, but that's all changed, of course, as most of us work from home now anyway. But um, I just had this idea of who that would be in my head, and it really helped. That kind of helped me figure out, well, wait, there's other people who feel this way. It's not just me.
Yeah, so when you decided that, did you give yourself a new archetype? Is that the, what do you say, kick ass Cass?
Yeah, I would say for that one, I've also had one I didn't actually mention in the book. I actually changed my middle name on Facebook to Rad Awesome, like, I don't know, like 12 years ago,
Yeah, when
15
I
years.
first saw that, I was like, "Oh, maybe she's from another country." Like, I was like,
No,
didn't
no,
even I didn't even read it through. I was like, "Oh, this is probably Scandinavian or Indian or something."
I did trick one of my friends into thinking it was a family name, which I will always enjoy. No,
Yes.
I just saw somebody else do it on Facebook and I thought, gosh, that's really funny. I like that. I think his was like rad cool. And I was like, but I'm rad awesome. So that's kind of become a thing too. So, I mean, I'll think of like when I got into coaching, I think about my grandma the most actually, because she's really confident. Well, not confident in a cocky way, but she's very just wise and generous, and people really respect her, and they want her opinion. And so I just kind of think about how she would be, and that helps as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a superhero or anything, but it can be, yeah, somebody that you know who you're like, what would my grandma do right now?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking of one particular friend of mine who she's had all the doors open for her in life because she makes people feel amazing.
Mm,
She like
yep,
whatever you're saying, she's like, "Wow, incredible! Like,
that's
tell me
awesome.
more." And you're like, "I feel real special." So
Oh, good.
now I'm thinking I need a version that's channeling her.
Yeah, because that ability to make people feel good is really powerful, and you can cultivate it for sure. And that is the point of this entire exercise, is that whatever you feel like you're lacking in, what happens that's really cool as a subset of this is the more you start tapping into that, the more you actually start being it, and then it starts to be just become a part of your personality. Like, it actually gets integrated, and you don't have to kind of think about, well, what would Sparkly Joe do or whatever. You just do it. And then you kind of start to go, ooh, and then you can make then that's when you can make other ones, or you can kind of tap back into that one as you need to. But it does start to integrate, and then you just start showing up as that more and more, depending on how much it resonates with you and how much you're using it. I mean, I can't say it would happen in like 10 minutes or something, but I have found that with my clients. Like, they're like, hey, I just been showing up like that. Like, I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because obviously if they're picking an archetype, it's in them already to some
Exactly.
degree. Yeah.
And I say always, I mean, I think Jim says this, competence breeds confidence. Like, if you do something, you're going to get more confident in it. Yes, your first couple times are going to suck. You just have to accept that. But you just do it, get going, do the thing, and you'll start to be that thing. And then that will make you more confident.
So how is this different than fake it till you make it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in my mind, I don't think fake it till you make. I mean, I don't love fake it till you make it, because to me it connotes lying, basically. Um, I think that what they're trying to get at is basically this, right? You get in there and you do the thing, and then you start to learn how to be the thing, right? But sometimes when I see people using fake it till you make it, it seems more like they're actually faking in the way of being dishonest. Um, you know, and that
Mhm.
means that you're just lying to yourself. So you're never actually really going to believe it. I mean, there's some interesting stuff around how to do affirmations, where you have to kind of build up to the right affirmation. You can't just go, I am a millionaire, when you've got like $1 in your bank account, because your brain is just like, what planet are you on? No, you're not a millionaire. And your brain will just keep fighting you on it, right? And going,
Yeah.
you're dumb, you're not a millionaire, da, da, da. So it's kind of the same idea, where it's like, if you are faking it that much, your brain will fight you on it. And then you're creating this subconscious loop that's coming back at you and reinforcing with more evidence that you are not that thing. So that's what I dislike about fake it till you make it. I mean, I actually found these things called affirmations, and it's more like a question. So you say, why is it so easy for me to, and you have to make it believable for yourself, right? Like, why is it so easy for me to make more money? So it wouldn't have to be like, I'm a millionaire. It would be like, why is it so easy for me to do this thing that you do think is within your reach?
Right.
And then your brain actually has to answer in the affirmative. Your brain actually has to give you that answer of like, well, because you've done this and you've done that. And it subconsciously works so much better. I use those with my clients a lot too, because it really helps you reaffirm subconsciously, rather than your brain wanting to go into negativity. So our brains, I mean, I love our brains, but they can be very negative. So you have to trick them, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was curious if you run into that, if they try to show up as a super you, but then their brains are like, it feels silly.
Yeah.
I
I
feel
mean,
like I'm
and
acting.
yes, that does happen for sure, and that's where we have to kind of tweak, well, did we get the super you right when we first created it? And that, that can be another session of like, okay, usually with the super you though, it needs to really that's where I check in the exercise of like, does it really resonate? It needs to be something that basically gives you tingles and you're like, ooh, like it gets you really excited. And so if you create your super you and it's not something that really gets the juices flowing, that's where you'll probably run into more of like what you're describing, where they'll start to feel fakier and fakier. The other thing, again, I also, like I said, you have to be able to suspend your idea of being serious or whatever. Like you have to like I said, you have to get over yourself to do this. I mean, I think you have to get over yourself to do any kind of personal growth development work, but you definitely have to get past this idea of uh I don't know. I always joke about this. Like I was a virgin till I was 20, and then um I don't think I even did anything with anybody for like another 5 years after that. And part of it was because I could see the cliche of like the process of, first we're going to sit next to each other on the couch and then we'll look at each other. It just felt really cheesy and like from a movie. And I had to get over that. I had to just go, yeah, this is the process that goes, this is how it happens. Just like get over myself. And then it was fine. So I kind of use that example because it's, you're holding yourself back, but because what's more important, feeling like you're not cliched or doing the thing you want to do, And so that's what I will bring up with my clients all the time of like, who's sitting around judging you on this, first of all? And second of all, does it matter? Like this idea of being cliched or being silly, it's all made up. It's all an interpretation.
Yeah, that's a good share.
Maybe too
Yeah,
much
I can totally
information.
relate to the like, what do I do with my hand? Like it's
Yes.
like
I was just
my
so
body.
awesome.
How close should I be to you? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly, and it was just like it felt so cheesy, and it's just like, well, who cares? It is cheesy. Like, that's just life. There's a lot
Yeah.
of cheese involved.
So, will you share about where people can find more about you, more about your work online? What's the best place to get in touch with you?
So yeah, I am on Instagram. It's at Cassa Grant, Cassagrant. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, so that's where I'm most active. And then of course my website is cassagrant.com, and I have an email list, so I send weekly tidbits to people to like similar to what we're talking about here, mostly on confidence, branding, and leadership. And yeah, those are the main places that I hang out online.
Excellent. Well, this I learned something today, so that was
So did
that was
I
really
for this
great.
book.
That was
Thank you
exciting.
so much for putting it together. You did an
Yeah,
amazing job.
yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's always fun hanging out with you, and congrats on the book and your work. And anything I didn't ask you about that you want to share real quick before we wrap?
No, I think this is great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Casa, of course. We'll see you soon.
Yeah.